Well, President Trump is facing his first real big challenge when it comes to the Second Amendment, and we're going to see just how pro-gun he's really going to be. Today we're going to be looking at the Supreme Court and their decision on so-called ghost guns, and also the DOJ's role in suppressor ownership, and whether those will actually fall off of the NFA under Trump's direction. And so these are two very big things for gun owners everywhere, and we're going to see exactly how Trump is going to fall on both of these issues. I'm going to tell you the implications from both of these, the wild decision by the Supreme Court on so-called ghost guns, and also I'm going to give you my opinion on not only what Trump can do, but what he will do. Of course, this is just my opinion, and I want to hear from y'all. Whether you agree or disagree, let me know what you think down below. Let's go and jump right in. So the Supreme Court ruled 7-2 that ghost guns can be regulated under the Gun Control Act. You got to go through a background check, and they have to be serialized going forward. So they actually sided with a Biden era ruling, and this is kind of the Supreme Court that we have, right? You think that the overwhelming majority of them being more conservative leaning, you would get a bunch of wins there when things go to the Supreme Court, but that's just not been the case. There's been some, but this shows you that they are not as willing to side with the Second Amendment, or even look at Bruin from 2022, which I've talked about a lot. By the way, you had two justices, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, that actually dissented from the other justices. Not surprising because of how consistent they've been when it comes to the Second Amendment, but maybe surprising to some, all three justices that Trump actually put into place voted with the liberals. Anyways, but when you look at it from a historical context, background checks are not a constitutional thing. They are a very new thing when it actually comes to firearm ownership in the United States, and I've talked about how flawed that system really is. And so when they talk about so-called ghost guns and their inability to be traced in crimes, well, the first thing is tracing really is not that great, right? There is a method to the madness that tracing, you have to go from manufacturer to dealer to the first person that bought it. If that gun has been sold, then the chain of command ends there. Tracing doesn't really lead back, as far as what I know and what I've heard from people that are actually doing this. Tracing doesn't really lead back to a single criminal as much as you would think. And also the background check system is only as good as the information that's actually put in there. Again, I've talked about this in the past, but it is an absolutely broken system. And the other part of this, criminals don't care about your background checks because most of them get their guns illegally, or they do terrible things with them, but that is not the vast majority of gun owners out there. That is a fact. I mean, there's no arguing those statistics. The vast majority of gun owners are law-abiding. Some of the most law-abiding people. All you're doing by saying, hey, you have to go through a background check, you have to have this so-called ghost gun, serialized and go through that background check, is saying that we're going to put the people that actually follow the law through additional processes in order to buy these firearms to make us feel good or something. And by the definition of what a firearm actually is, this is why it's so ridiculous. And essentially, companies are playing the game that the ATF has been playing when it comes to the Gun Control Act and anything else, really. It comes down to a definition. So where I can get a handguard or a trigger by itself, or a hammer, or a barrel, or a flash hider, or whatever, all these individual pieces, no background check required. It's only once you introduce a frame or receiver that, oh, that's got to be serialized, and we have to have your background check on that in order to sell you that item. But so-called ghost guns are incomplete. They are just pieces that you actually have to then put together. They're for home builders, but let's just be honest, they're also for people that actually understand what the Second Amendment is about. And that does not include the government knowing every single firearm you have. That's why there's so many liberals and conservatives, to be honest with you, that think background checks are actually constitutional, when really at the end of the day, they are not. It's not the government's job or business to know every single firearm that you have. It's really none of their business, because at the end of the day, what the Second Amendment is truly about is not about hunting or target shooting or even really self-defense. It's about a way to protect ourselves in case they ever become tyrannical. And so them knowing every firearm you have directly contradicts what the Second Amendment is about. And while some can argue that, that is just facts. So the ATF could then reverse its decision, right, and its expansion of the Gun Control Act, and how it was able to essentially just come up with new definitions. And I think Clarence Thomas actually said it best, where this court, Supreme Court, is actually approving government overreach as to what is and what is not a firearm. So Trump could rescind that rule, and of course, under Kash Patel's leadership, then choose not to enforce it, not to expand those definitions and just come up with your own, which is very dangerous. I actually liked what Clarence Thomas said about this. When people in an unelected agency can just come up with terms that can restrict your rights, especially those pertaining to the Second Amendment, that's when we have crossed very dangerous territory, and when the Supreme Court upholds that, that's even more concerning. But again, there is something Trump can actually do about this. Now, suppressors is a little more interesting. Remember, the DOJ said just a week ago, this was under Michael Simpson, acting attorney for the DOJ, essentially argued in front of a Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals that suppressors are not protected arms under the Second Amendment. Well, the Department of Justice said, hey, we're going to give you 30 days to re-review the government's position on suppressors. Now, what this means is actually a good thing. They're not going to pursue charges against people that, didn't go through extended background checks. And they're going to view suppressors as a protected arm under the Second Amendment. But essentially, what we really need is the Hearing Protection Act or the SHUSH Act, either one of the two, to finally get pushed through and passed as a law. That way, future administrations can't just say, oh, actually, you know what, we're going to start prosecuting people that have these illegal suppressors. Because once you put it into law, once you remove this from the NFA, that's going to be much more beneficial to gun owners everywhere. So now is the time to actually get that done. And I believe I believe this one is one that Trump fully supports. I really have no reservations in saying that. Of course, I could be totally wrong, but I really believe that he's going to back this one. When it comes to ghost guns, my opinion is if Gun Owners of America is keeping in contact with the president, which I believe they are, this will get rescinded as well. Because understanding what ghost guns actually are and getting that good information to the president is going to be so crucial, because of the way these terms and guns have been talked about and how evil they've made them appear. Even suppressors, having somebody good in his ear, I believe, will push Trump to actually rescind a lot of these Biden-era restrictions and ones that have been around since the frickin' 30s. And so I believe these are two that President Trump will look at in favor and protecting and expanding the Second Amendment. But of course, one of them has to go through Congress, and I believe that'll get the president's support as well. Time will tell, but these are two big tests for President Trump, and we'll see which way he goes on them. Let me know what you think down below, and of course, give me your opinion, whether you agree or disagree. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. See you in the next one, and as always, hold them down.